Hello again. It's been a while since I've made the last video. Last time I did this was in October, and I talked about my mescaline ceremony trip. Yeah, a lot has happened since then, and I think I've just found it a bit difficult to pick something that I actually really wanted to make a video on. But I just learned something, or like just recently discovered something about my spiritual journey, my healing process, that was really interesting. Just being able to conceptualize this idea has really helped me understand, yeah, just understand my healing way better. So that's what I'm going to share with you guys today. Yeah, so I just got back from just a small little like 3.5 day retreat. And this retreat was much different than what I've done in the past for my own spiritual growth. So basically, I've either done silent meditation retreats. I've done, I guess, like 4 of those now, 2 solo and then 2 official ones. And then also my psychedelic journeys, and then just the day to day. But this one was really cool because it was essentially, it wasn't a silent one. And I connected with so many people so deeply at this retreat. And we also did something similar to holotropic breathwork, which I might talk about in a whole other video. But what I actually want to talk about today is more so what I'm calling a retreat hangover, or even trauma release hangover or healing hangover. I haven't quite picked an exact term, but a beautiful soul used the term emotional hangover at the retreat. You know, the next day after letting out so much emotion, she was feeling like an emotional hangover, and it was something that really connected with me. Something that once I started thinking about it more, it really helped me understand my process, and I think what is something that will relate to many people. But everyone's journey is a little bit different, but I think overall there'll be a lot of crossover. So yeah, the first time this idea had started kind of being formed in me was actually during my Vipassana retreat, which was a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And during that, I actually made a little short 8-minute video, so I do recommend watching that. But basically, what I shared there was that there was this clear connection between like my mental well-being and my physical well-being. And it seemed essentially that this, like, my conditioning would come out as like this tension in my body. So it basically, in the early days of this retreat, I would sit and meditate, and eventually, you know, soreness would start coming in my body, like mainly in my back. And to some that might make sense, like, oh yeah, you're sitting still for a while, obviously that will happen. But what was interesting in what I discovered there was that it didn't actually seem to be related to the sitting that this physical tension was coming up. Because later on in the retreat, it actually turned out that the longer I sat and meditated on the sensations in my body, the more relaxed I would be, the more that tension would disappear and fade away. And so what I discovered there was that it seems, and this is something that many, spiritual circles talk about, it seems that there was essentially this tension was coming out from like deeper rooted stuff within me. So there's this idea about how the body is essentially like a memory. Like your body holds memories of your past experiences, and it holds it in the form of like this tension. And sometimes it's not noticeable. It's deep down, but then it'll come to the surface, and when it's at the surface, that's when you're actually able to clear it using various techniques. And in this particular Vipassana retreat, it was all about just, literally just paying attention to the sensations, just being aware of the sensations. And through that, you would start, clearing that surface level tension. But what happened when you do that is that eventually I would clear it all, and I would be just so much more relaxed physically, but also like mentally. Like the frequency of my thoughts was drastically reduced, and you're just like calm on another level. But what was interesting, as I did that for a while, eventually that calmness would fade away and more tension would come up. And the way I interpreted it before is that whole retreat was like a little bit like a cleanse, where I was like clearing off that surface level of tension. And once I did that, it just gave the space for more of that tension from within to come out to the surface, and then I could clear that. And so like, the first 3-4 days of the retreat, it was very much, pretty much nonstop tension. But then it was like I was truly getting rid of stuff, just getting rid of that surface stuff to allow deeper stuff to come up. And what you'll notice in this journey, it never ends. There's essentially always deeper rooted stuff, because this conditioning to essentially not be happy, it runs deep. But what was really profound for me recently was, I don't know if it was just the word hangover that made things click, because it was pretty much the same idea on what I'm describing here that I was experiencing kind of on the hourly scale, but now I'm noticing it on a more general, like week-to-week scale, or retreat and post-retreat. So like in the Vipassana, it was like in an hour sitting, I could have tension come up, and then I could clear it, and then, the next hour, more tension might come up, and so on. So it was more like an hourly basis. Whereas this, I've noticed now, I get a post-retreat hangover. So this last retreat was really amazing. It was super transformative. Basically, the idea was everyone was just very vulnerable. And you release your trauma through that way. And like another thing that we did was this breathwork thing that I mentioned, which was pretty much designed to release trauma. And so post that experience, last night at the retreat, I was just on a high. I hadn't felt that good in so long. And then the next day, when I drove back, I started getting like, just very sore, like physically, just physically tired and kind of tight, mainly in the back. For some reason, that seems to be where my attention comes up. But like mentally and spiritually, I was feeling great. I was very like motivated. I was inspired. I was feeling, just very motivated, inspired, more creative. I have all these ideas about what I could do next. All these things that I've been putting off that I'm like gonna do this week, that I'm planning, and things like that. But but physically I was like sort of just tight. And yeah, so my theory is that essentially, just like in the Vipassana silent meditation retreat, that, you know, these really just ecstatic highs where you've released so much stuff and you feel just so free and relaxed, your body essentially recognizes that and just realizes, oh, like, you know, they have more space now to deal with more stuff, you know, to heal more things. And so now this is the time that the body brings up deeper rooted stuff. And what's interesting is that I think it may even be by its own innate intelligence that it brings it up just as physical trauma. For me, maybe it's different for other people, but it just comes up as physical sensations, which in my state of being very still mentally and spiritually like on a high, I can deal with that stuff much easier. And I think it's almost like the body's like, oh, okay, like, you know, he's ready now for this deeper rooted stuff to come out from the depths of my being and come out to the surface to allow me to release more. Yeah, so that was pretty profound kind of realization. It really helped me realize so many things in the past where I come back from some of these experiences, retreats and so on, and this physical tension, physical exhaustion just kind of makes it difficult to do anything. And I would resist it, you know, because I was feeling so motivated and inspired, and I had all these ideas and things that I want to do, and I want to do this, and I'm going to start going running, and I'm going to, you know, and so on. But physically it was like, no, like you can't do it. And for me, this paradox was pretty frustrating during those times, because it was like there was two parts of my being that were like, you know, fighting each other more so than usual. But now that I know that it's like that's innate intelligence of my body, of like the human being, I'm much more able to just accept it, and not just accept it, but like make the most of it. So now I've kind of realized that when I get out of one of these retreats and the physical tension comes up, then it's the time to deal with that. So I just went, the day after the retreat, I did a float tank, and that really allowed me to just fully clear all that surface level tension. The other thing that I'm noting to myself is that this time seems like a time that's better for a lot of contemplation, a lot of just self-reflection, future planning, creative things, creative thinking, and things like that. So, you know, maybe I should draw during this time, or, you know, plan for the future, but allow myself the time for me to kind of get over this hangover, because essentially my body was like, there's so much space, like here's all of it. All of that, what we have for now. And so I need to just allow myself to heal from that, but it's also allowing me to still use that high that I have mentally and spiritually to kind of, you know, direct the next part of my journey. Yeah, so I think that's all I really have to say about this topic. Just a short one here. Yeah. Thank you for listening or watching. And really, if any of this at all is useful to you, then please let me know. I love to hear it. It keeps me motivated. It'll make me want to make them more often. I already do want to, but I don't really do it unless I'm feeling really motivated. And there's about like 3 videos that I've got kind of wanted to talk about that, yeah, are on topics that came up in between the last mescaline trip and now. Yeah, and so I'll just also talk briefly about like what's coming down the line. I'm actually participating in another mescaline ceremony, and I am super excited for that. And I was even fortunate enough to help with the process of preparing the medicine just for part of it. So yeah, I will most definitely be coming out with another trip report. I'm sure at some point after that, and then I will be going back to work and going from there. Oh yeah, back to what I was talking about before. This actually really helped me with something with work too, because with work, I am, I often go out into the bush for, weeks at a time. And that time is actually quite healing for me. I find it's a lot of time to contemplate, a lot of time. The work is not physically or mentally demanding, and I have lots of time to, do yoga and things like that. And so in a way that those shifts are like a retreat. And every time I was coming back from those, I was feeling just the same way, very motivated, inspired, wanting to do all these things. But then physically I would just crash. And so, yeah, this is more than just post retreats. This is post, every long stint of work that I do. And so knowing how I can more easily just go into the flow of those experiences, essentially riding the highs and the lows and using those periods for whatever my body feels like it needs, Yeah, so that's all I have to say about all of this. I appreciate anyone who listened and watched this, and I will see you next time. Ciao.